Hi James, great to have you on board. I know we've known each other for a long time, and I'm sure everybody. I think you're a big name in the industry, so it's really good to have you on board. And I know you're a really busy person, so I will definitely try and keep these questions so basically we can get as much out of your mind and your brain as much as possible.
That sounds dangerous, Nick, but it's great. It's great to be here. Long time listener, first time caller. Really, really great to be here. So thank you for having me.
No, no. Oh man, we've been trying. We've been talking about it and trying to get you on board as long as we can. Because ultimately, like I say, I think I've seen you talk at a number of different conferences, and you're always massively articulate, but also at the same time, really, I think some of the suggestions and the thoughts are really succinct and thought provoking as well at the same time.
That's
So
very
it's
kind.
cool.
Very kind. Very kind.
So before we really start into some of the nuts and bolts, I think it'd be really interesting, and I think sometimes we miss that in the sort of edtech market, really, and understanding the true role what someone plays. And I know you've been in industry as much as you, in the sense of you've been in with RM, and ultimately at the same time you're now in a mat. But if you could just sort of give us a bit of a view on your day, your week, your year as a CEO, and what that's like, and where you feel there's some really positive joy, but also at the same time, I hate to say it, but we all want to understand where some of the pain points are because we would like to try and fix some of those. So yeah, if you can give us a sort of
Yeah.
general view on your day and life as a CEO, that'd be really great.
Yeah. Great. So I think that one of the things that is often perhaps not fully appreciated with the trust sector is that we are by our very nature immature as organisations, and I mean that with the highest compliments possible to our own trust and also the sector more generally. But it's just a part of the reality that any trust is at most circa 15 or so years old,
Hmm.
and when you think about that in the grand scheme of organisations, that doesn't allow a lot of time for maturity to be gained. Now it is getting there, but what overlays on that as complexity is scale, and lift schools has both scale but also a relative amount of youth. And to come to your question in quite a convoluted way, that means that my role uh, is extremely varied. I know it sounds really cheesy to say that no 2 days are the same. Occasionally there are days that are the same, I must say, but the variation comes as a result of that scale and, in relative terms, a still maturing organisation. So we are trying to do things at an extreme level of pace, and this is a role that doesn't necessarily tie directly to what you see as the job title of COO, in that you're not, day to day, you're not sat in boardrooms making big strategic decisions all of the time.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of the time, you're rolling your sleeves up, you're supporting schools, you're getting involved. So, in my particular world, that covers what I proudly refer to as the supporting gig. So, all of our operational services, from the way in which we manage our physical estate and the buildings, through to the technology, which we'll no doubt talk more about, but all of the stuff in between that as well, from things like our HR services and how we support our people, to how we procure, how we stay compliant, how we keep ourselves safe, how we market ourselves, really thinking about how it all stitched together. Of course, the data and the systems that we use, really allowing the teachers to focus on what they do best, our senior leaders and our school leaders to do what they best. And that means that on one day, you might get a call to say, our boiler's broken. Please, can you help us? That call might not come directly to me. Sometimes it might, and you've got to respond to that. On another day, you might be talking about your 10-year AI strategy and how that's going to land. And then on another day, you might be responding to big sector news. There's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about the proposed new schools bill, and responding to that. Most recently, we've heard about Ofsted reform as well. So you get involved in quite big sector pieces. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of this massive spectrum of stuff that kind of comes over the plate. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's incredibly demanding. Ultimately, what keeps me going, I think, is this kind of concept of allowing every single child to have that great education,
Yeah.
and you feel like you're making a tangible difference on a day-to-day basis, whatever part of the spectrum you're on. You can feel that day to day, and that's incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think even though, like you say, it must be really challenging at times with all the different aspects, but also it probably keeps the job quite interesting as well in the same time. In a sense, you're not doing the same. I've been working as you have in corporates, and sometimes you're doing the same thing, and it can get a bit boring.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair, and I think that there's an element of routine that comes with that, which is incredibly satisfying as well. In that we talk internally about a rhythm of the year, and that that helps to keep one part of my brain very satisfied actually, in that you're working through, and you're ultimately driving towards an outcome. In this case, the outcome is brilliantly empowered children that have got not just the good academia, but also they feel confident in their self, they feel confident about the pathway they're taking, and that rhythm does help. But the variation is huge. I think particularly in my sphere, there's such rapid change at the moment, and I'm no doubt we'll come on to talk about technology, but it feels like that in itself is keeping us on our toes. And I know the same goes for the education business side of things as well. So that's good for us all, isn't it?
It is. No, I totally agree. It's interesting what you're just saying about the multitude of basically different parts of the strategies, isn't there? I think it's a little bit like there was, we talk about so we get asked lots by different companies about when do Mats implement X, Y, or Z sort of types of solutions. And it's quite interesting because you can actually see a sort of so when the academy market first opened, then there was a lot of rushing towards a finance system first of all, probably rather than an MIS. Then it sort of moved to MIS. It now seems to be HR. So you can almost see that lots of mats are almost thinking the same way, where they're going, need to get my finances sorted first of all, because obviously, the old like
Yeah.
FMS from Sims and stuff didn't wasn't adequate enough for academies. Then you go, right, now we need to look at our MIS because that's fundamentally quite a big database and again, really, really important from a perspective of census, getting the money as well from that perspective. And now everyone's looking at HR. And that's quite interesting because all mats are there's like you say, there's obviously individual mats are looking at things individually, but there's almost this natural progression as well.
Yeah, I would heartily agree with that, and I would add to it as well that certainly just sharing a bit of internal thinking at the moment is there is a big focus on our people systems, not least because I think of the ones you just mentioned, it's actually the most disparate space at the moment because and I'm quite conscious in using the term people systems there because we think beyond traditional HR in terms of payroll and
Mm.
booking holiday, etc. And we think about learning management and development. We think about onboarding and recruiting. And when I think about the sector challenges at the moment, recruitment and retention, there's a real relationship between that and the systems need there. But just to extend your point there a little bit, I think also certainly our thinking now is turning towards the relationship between all those systems you mentioned.
Mm.
And I have almost from day one of moving from edtech into this sector started banging a drum around the importance of integration.
Yeah,
And I think now more than ever, I mean, really, really now, but more than ever and into the future, the importance of those systems working together is
yeah,
paramount. Uh, if we really want to capitalize on this coming wave of AI, we really want to make sure that we are maturing as an organization. We can no longer deal with disparate systems that don't talk to each other. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that we definitely need a single system. That could be an option, but I think that comes with downsides because you might make compromises then on functionality, which are unattractive.
yeah,
But it feels like a hygiene factor, and I know I'm probably speaking to the converted here, but it feels like a hygiene factor that systems should work together. Data should flow, the access should be seamless. But there is a reality that I don't think we're quite there. I don't think we're quite there. Certainly, lift schools. That isn't a reality at the moment, and I think that will start to hold us back pretty soon if we don't capitalize on that.
I agree. I think that it almost needs to be an obligation or even maybe an MOU around all systems that data is open. And I fully agree with you. At the end of the day, we don't know at the moment what insights we can get from all the data, but what we definitely do know is that the amount of data we have is,
Mm.
it's enormous. It's ginormous. And if you also included local authority data as well, in the sense of, because that has an impact, social care, health, send,
Yeah,
then again, it
yeah.
gets, you get even greater insights potentially for educators and mats and schools. So yeah, definitely converted on that one.
Yeah, and that, well, you make a really interesting point there, which I think is a compliment to your kind of your the lens that you have on the not just the sector, but the sphere more generally, and public services. If you look to other countries around the world, they are thinking more holistically about
Mm.
the data that's associated with the individual. And I think if we're really going to get this right long term, you do need to think about connections with health service. You need to think about connections with all different types of public service, so that things really work seamlessly. I mean, we have to work quite hard, I think, as an organisation at the moment, not helped by the disparate nature of our public services, but also, let's face it, our sector is quite disparate.
Yeah.
As an organisation, Lift Schools is one of the biggest trusts, but we still only represent around, I did the maths the other day actually, about 0.2% of all of the pupils in England and Wales, and we're a biggie.
Yeah.
so that disparate nature of the data means we're going to have to work extra hard to get it really pumped together. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about open, it's about open sharing. It's about open standards. It's about everybody talking the same language, which sounds really obvious when you say it out loud, doesn't it?
It does. I'm right behind your banner, basically. That helps.
We're in it together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's a very interesting. And do you think we could ever get? Because obviously I think the benefits are massive in my view. In fact, I don't know the full length of the benefits because we've not tried it and we don't know it. But I foresee lots of different benefits, especially with AI coming in. But do you ever see the point where there might be that single point of truth around a child in the sense that we have a massive holistic view on them, where, when we talk about individualized learning, it's not just about, their style or, directing them in, but it's also the sort of social elements around it as well, in the sense of, what their family life is like, is there any additional support? It's a little bit like when people talk about kids need to be in school, and I would really like to hear your view on this because you've got much more, more directly related to this. But you sort of go, does every kid need to be in school? If they are more comfortable at being at home, do they need to be educated at home? And when they're happy to be in school because they like that, maybe that social element in the sense of sport or something like that, then actually that's the right time to bring them in. Or can you see that happening? And do you think mats and schools are able to accommodate that?
I think I've got a few different lenses on that. One is a personal view based upon my experience with my own children, etc. But I think there's also a wider organisational view. So if I take my personal view, I feel very passionate about the benefits that come from organisations providing a physical space for children to come together, and the benefits of face-to-face learning. But that's a view that's kind of coming from as much from a parent angle
Hmm.
as it is from the angle of a more holistic view. My more holistic view is that there are children with massively different needs, right across the sector, and I think we have as good a lens on that as anybody. And there's a societal expectation that we evolve and we accommodate that. Now, I feel that we need to play a role in challenging, some of those, maybe kind of preconditioned expectations that are coming through around, I'd rather be at home. Attendance is a big challenge for the sector, and try and make sure we are articulating the benefits of coming together, in a school environment, coming together and building in an expectation that there are benefits that come from that routine and that school environment. But then on the flip side, we think about the world of work. We think about all of the controversy we see in the news around, hybrid working, home working. I think I just saw this week that one organisation that won't be named is they're dealing with strikes around expectations of coming back to the office, etc. You can see societal change there, and I think there is a point there around Lift Schools and others in the organisation need to be absolutely tuned into societal change and expectations. And I think that goes for tech. I think it goes for use of physical building. I think it will in time come to challenge the shape of a school.
Mm.
And I think tech has a big part to play with that. I think dynamic homeschool agreements, thinking about what we need to do with our staff as well, flexible working, chiming into that bit around corporate work. So I think hopefully that answers the second part of your question. I didn't answer the first part, did I? About the join up of student data with wider. And I think that is achievable. I think the complexity in that is once again a little bit related to societal change. So once again, if you don't mind me giving you a bit of a personal anecdote,
No.
I'm a data sharer. I believe in open source. I believe in sharing. I compare that to my wife, who's same age as me, similar upbringing, but she is incredibly data sensitive.
Yeah.
She's very, very conservative, even dare I say, about aspects of the cloud and where she's handing over data. So bring that to our children, and she layers on that sensitivity. And I'm sorry to pick on my wife, but I guess I pointed out that people will have different expectations, and parents will have different expectations. And so I think that is one key challenge for us to overcome: is you really have to play to everybody's different views, and those views are no less valid just because they're different. And I think that could provide some challenge in getting to a place where we do have this flow of data in such a way. Ultimately, sorry, I feel like I'm going on quite a bit in response to this question.
That's great.
Ultimately, if I think about my wife, she'll never forgive me for talking so publicly about it. I think that she's a good example where she needs to see the benefits as well as be totally assured of the risks. Whereas I may be a bit more of a risk taker in that regard. I think that she needs to see those two things correlate in her mind, and that's where we come to talk about the coming wave of AI and really reaping the rewards of that. I'll pause there.
No, I think it's brilliant, and I totally agree, because I think we all forget sometimes. Well, I definitely do. I'm one of these people who sometimes goes, but this is a brilliant idea. We should go. Why isn't everyone moving towards it? And then you sort of go, actually, like you say, there's other people who are going, whoa, 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 whoa. Slow down. It's my data.
Yeah, exactly. And you need those people in life, don't you? And what I think, bringing back to my role, I think one of the interesting roles I have to play is on some days I'm the optimist, and I'm naturally more of an optimist anyway, thinking about the possibilities, the art of the possibility, and we're doing that right now with our AI strategy. But on other days, I mean, believe it or not, I'm accountable for risk management of the trust these days. So I need to think about the risks and the mitigations and get into that and be the devil's advocate. Think about the controls and the assurances we're putting in place, and that. So you do need that balance, don't you? It's the yin and the yang.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in relation to AI, actually, I'm quite interested in the strategy that your Matt is looking at. So I think with AI, obviously, there's a lot of fear, and probably going back to your point that we need to demonstrate the benefits and be able to sell those. And I think that, I think sometimes EdTech is quite bad at basically selling their benefits. I think they go, got this brilliant product, it's going to do loads of things for you. It's amazing. Don't worry about it. It's like, well, actually, I'd like to have some proof around this, and I want to understand what it actually is going to give for me. But do you think with AI, so where actually, this is probably an interesting question. Where do you think we are with AI in maths and education at the moment? Where do you think the majority stand?
Well, I think the hype is pretty massive at the moment, isn't it? And I think in large regard, rightly so. I do really feel that. I mean, having spent my whole career in this space, this does feel different to me. It does feel like there is a genuine correlation between the hype, the potential benefits, and the reality. And I think we're starting to see that already. We really are. There's always a danger that it goes a little bit over the top, and there is that kind of that curve. We all know the hype curve, right? But I think in answer to your question about where we're at, I mean, I've just come fresh for a couple of weeks ago from the Bet Show, as I know many others will have too. And it felt like that was a good lens into this reality feeling different. That this year's bet felt to me substantially different to the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that's because we are seeing correlation between the promise of the tech and the impact it's having. And I think about how I see that coming to life now in live schools, from things we're doing in the classroom to things that we're seeing in our back office, and whether that be, to touch upon some of the core tenets of our AI strategy around personalizing learning, around reducing workload, helping job satisfaction. It feels like we are really, really kind of chiming onto that. I think there's more to come still in terms of really innovating and really changing. And I think there's some important principles we need to be clear on. So one of our clear principles is the role of the teacher, the role of the human connection, the role of empathy is paramount, and we don't see that going. But I think there is genuine potential there that we are in a new realm of impact for tech. I think, to your question about our strategy, one of the keys to unlocking that is just thinking in a really key structured way about how we're going to get there. So our strategy breaks down into, we talk about 3 horizons. And forgive me for talking management theory for a second.
That's all good.
So we call upon, quite regularly with our strategy, we call upon McKinsey's 3 horizon model. So we think about actions now that are going to have really long-term impact. And we've actually kind of started with the end in mind a little bit within the realms of predictability of technological developments. And we've written down what a lift school might look like in 2034 from the perspective of use of AI. And it is a might look like. There are some elements of predictability there, but there's some elements of unpredictability. But 2034 as a kind of 10-year look into the future feels like it's a sensible point in time. So that's our horizon. And there are elements of that strategy, as I say, that we're taking action on now that prepare us for that future. The systems conversation we had earlier is a really good example of that, where getting the foundations right now is critical to that long-term vision.
Yeah.
Some of the work that we're involved in with the DFE that is kind of allowing us to shape some of the policy and thinking is also part of that long term. But then flipping back to Horizon 1, maybe I'll finish with Horizon 2. There are some things we need to do now that are absolutely having impact now, and it relates to your point about, or our point about the hype curve, in that it's about driving awareness right now. This is about, we've got 4,500 staff. In our mind, every single one of those staff needs to be AI aware. This is not, and I've publicly in front of our head teachers stood up and said this is not something for the techies. This is not about our IT team. This is about everybody.
Yeah.
As a senior leader now, you are as interested in technology and AI as you should be in behavior, in attendance, in safeguarding. And our key to that really is not just saying, oh, that's over to you, kind of worry about it, is actually driving that awareness. So our small digital team, small but mighty digital team, have been on an absolute mission to get out there that initial AI awareness training. Probably not the right term, but I suppose we're opening people's eyes up to the possibilities. And what we're finding is once you open that, I mean, majority of people are just running to it anyway, right? But for those that aren't, it actually opens them up into a place where they can explore in a safe way. Yeah. And that's part of Horizon. Horizon 2, just to finish off, the kind of taking actions now for the more medium term, relates to our very ambitious strategy overall. I mean, as with all tech strategy, I feel passionately it needs to link to where you're going overall as an organization. And our current strategy has some real milestones associated with 2028. We talk about what we refer to as Lift 490, 4 areas of 90% aspiration, Key Stage 4 plus, Key Stage 2, phonics and reading age. And they are pretty ambitious, 90% achievement in each of those. And tech has a real part to play in that. So a big part of the Horizon 2 stuff is actually about targeting where we see the impact of tech to things that support us with that strategy. So right now, perhaps the most ambitious part of Lift 490 is Key Stage 4. So we're putting tech right into the hands of year 10s and 11s to help them personalize that learning, to help them to have an impact around the teaching. And that's where the strategy correlates. The final part of Horizon 2 is around making sure that in amongst all of that excitement, the risk hat goes on again, and we put in place the right governance frameworks. So we're not just going into, forgive me for using the term, but the wild west of tech, um, and picking up every, because you only have to look, on Instagram, on Facebook, on whatever feed you choose, and every bit of tech has got AI associated with it now, hasn't
Yeah.
it? So we need a framework where we can evaluate that principles, evaluate it against all of our data protection expectations, etc., and onboard that in a way. And we need to do that in a way which doesn't hold us back, but it just keeps us safe and secure in the same way. And so we're also doing that work now for Horizon 2's benefit. As usual, I've witted on, but hopefully that's
Brilliant.
useful.
No, James. Honestly, it's always brilliant. It's really great to get those insights, I think, personally. So, in relation, so you talk about staff and their awareness of AI, and putting the right policies in, and it is part of the sort of security or the risk element, and sort of implementation part of that training, I'm guessing. And then my second question is, what about the kids? Because they also have Instagram, and so is there an element where you are also being, putting AI as part of your curriculum, basically protecting yourself with AI.
Yeah, really good questions. So taking those in turn, absolutely. Part of the awareness training is about doing two things really. One is opening people up to those considerations they should just make. So to quote some of the digital team's awareness session content, they use an acronym called Boosted, where they think they put across, and I won't go through every bit of detail, but they effectively pose questions to individuals that they should apply in considering their use of AI. And it's not just about safe and secure, it's also just about good practice that comes with that. So it's about being balanced, open. I've got it in front of me, so forgive me for reading it. Ownership, secure, time, enhancement, and decision. So
Yeah.
there are questions that come as part of that. And it prompts people to think about, as I say, not just the safety and security that comes with it, but things like really owning the in and owning the out. It's a tool, it's not a crutch. It's about using the tech in a way that's actually going to support you. It doesn't replace you. It's about, really, really, really working alongside you. So that is a really key part of it. But the other part of the awareness training is also about the early results, if you like, of our governance framework coming through. So we refer to trust-supported technologies as a common term, where we have beyond our core systems, which we talked about earlier, finance, HR, those are, for want of a better term, non-negotiables. We all use the same platform. We know the benefits of that. That's our core trust technology. But a little bit wider than that, we have these trust-supported technologies. So we've been through the process of assessing it. We're comfortable. We've probably got a commercial agreement if it's not a free platform. We're certainly in a position where we can feel confident about its use. And we publish that as a toolkit. I make this sound like we've been doing it for years. It's quite fresh, but we are now in a position where we can say with confidence to our staff, if you want a note-taking app, this is the one that we see trust supported. If you want support from an LLM perspective, well, actually, we're a Google house. Gemini is our go-to tool. It doesn't mean that others are off bounds, but it gives people confidence, and that stitches really well to the first point. And then coming to your second question about students, I think it's a fantastic question, and I think it's an area of our strategy which is in need of a little bit of refinement, because in our strategy we talk about that post 2034 world, which is highly relevant to your question about students, because if you think about a typical year 4, year 5, year 6 child at the moment, they're going to be going into the world of work in 2034. And that's quite a scary prospect, isn't it? We know the world of work is going to be incredibly different. There is a fairly high chance that there will be a different job market. It might be the first time ever where the technological revolution creates less jobs rather than more. And it feels different to industrial revolution, where we feel like the tech is perhaps going to take the load from humans to a point where it's a different landscape.
Yeah.
And there's a level of unpredictability comes with that, but it's really relevant to your question about what we're teaching children, because they're going to be in a transitionary state through there. And I read a piece of research which says, and I don't think this is groundbreaking, but I think it's always stuck with me. If you think about our mothers and fathers, they would have typically had one job in one career. I'm being very sweeping here and probably ageist, but if you go to our generation and maybe the generation that's just going into the world of work now, you maybe got people there that are moving between different jobs in a single career, or maybe they've got one or two career changes. Think to those children that are going into that post 2034 world. They are going to be constantly learning and adapting. Their world is going to be incredibly different. And so I think that's very relevant to what we're teaching them now. Are we doing that right now today? Truthfully, not, Nick. To be honest, we're teaching a curriculum, and we're pretty proud of that. We're absolutely, kind of proud of what the experience we're giving it. But is our curriculum really reflective of that post 2034 world? No, is the answer. And I think that is something that, as a sector, and there's curriculum reviews going on right now, I really hope that we can start to factor in the coming years.
That's really interesting. So, in some ways, we talk about adaptive learning, but we mean adaptive teaching. So, so as part of the curriculum, does it need to start being a more adaptive learning as well, in the truest form for the child? So, teaching them how to continue to learn on an ongoing basis. So, even when they finish school, that's not the last part of learning. Because there's a lot of adults even now, and sometimes. I try my hardest to read a book every now and then, but I don't do it frequently enough. But that's
Yeah,
just going to be really important.
yeah, yeah. I'm probably going to once again annoy my wife here by giving a personal analogy, but this time to my son, my 6-year-old son. So I feel like I'm using him a bit like a guinea pig, but in a very controlled way. I should caveat, whereby he'll come home. He's year one. He'll come home and he'll talk to me about, the other week he was talking to me about him learning about the Great Stink. And I mean, my knowledge on the Great Stink is pretty limited, to be honest with you, Nick. So we have on the phone accessible an LLM with voice in it, and we've been dabbling over maybe the last 9 months or so, and he's built a relationship with it. And I should be really careful my wording there. The relationship is controlled; it's with me present, but he can engage with. We refer to it as Jack. It's a spin-off from ChatGPT, Jack, and he named Jack because he, in his words, it helps to jack him up, lift him up. It supplements his knowledge, which I thought was pretty smart for a
that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's it stayed with me. I mean, his original suggestion of a name was Pants, and I thought that was less appropriate. So that's a more rounded response. Anyway, he'll engage with Jack, and he did so on the Great Stink as an example. And you can just see it come to life. You can see him adapting his learning, asking questions. It's a really fluid experience, and he's effectively got a teaching assistant at home. I think it's really important that as parents we're there to support that. And I think much in the same way as I think it's really important that teachers are there to support that. But you can totally see that his pathway of learning is being enhanced by that tech. And so that's a really long-winded way of saying absolutely to your question. It's just about finding a way where you can do that in a way where it's available to all. It equalizes the playing field. It doesn't create a disadvantage gap that's further than one we already have. And it's done in a controlled, appropriate way. I can absolutely. This is potentially this is the controversial bit of that 2034 vision I mentioned. I can see a future where schools are not just using AI; they could be responsible for commissioning the AI around the child. Because if you think about the role schools have today, they would be responsible for any early health care plans, for example, the HCPs. It's not a million miles away that to then assume that they would be well placed to think about those needs and the technology that is needed to support them. So that could mean tailoring and commissioning an AI assistant around those child's needs. If you think about it, that's kind of what I've done for my son, in that I've set it up and I've, some basic things, they know his age, they know where he's at. It's learning all the time about what he's learning and getting better. You can see the role it could play, and you can see that schools will be really well placed to do that. Loads of risks to get over to do that. Loads of controls needed to make sure that doesn't get out of control. And there will be parents out there, to our earlier conversation, that feel uncomfortable about that. But I, for one, find that quite exciting. I find it quite exciting.
I do, but obviously we're both we're both in that sort of tech world as well. So
True.
Probably in some ways it's understandable. It's interesting because I've also in fact, we've done a presentation on it before where in Japan there's a company called SoftCell, and they're actually putting robots in classrooms as helping with assistant teaching, and that's mainly because sometimes, especially with really young kids, they don't want to feel, humans and adults can be quite scary sometimes. They don't want to look, stupid or difficult in front of them. So actually, they sometimes are, some of them, not all, but some of them are going to those robots and asking
Mm,
questions or wherever it is, and actually having a really, really positive experience. And I do think, like I say, I do think it's down to the individual child. I think the thing that would always worry me is if that information never got back to a teacher, because you need that again, going back to the full having the full holistic view on that child is important. Teachers should be able, should have that information. Otherwise we're basically putting one arm behind the back sort of type of scenario. So I think there's a, I think I absolutely love the idea of adaptive learning for children, and those sort of tutor bots and that sort of stuff. I think are brilliant. But yeah, I do think we need to make sure that teachers have all the information that's gathered from them, and that's why I think you're saying that's why maybe commissioning an agent on top
yeah.
of an LLM is the right thing to do.
And well, just chiming in on two key points stood out from what you just said to me there. Which I agree with all of it, but the really interesting point about the robotic technologies and the convergence of that with AI tech, I think that's fascinating. I'll definitely look up that Japanese example. But I had in my mind that there's a point of convergence there, isn't there, about those two technologies? And people don't talk about robotic technologies in quite the prevalence that they do AI tech at the moment. But there's going to be a point. We obviously see it in other spaces like driverless cars, etc. When's it coming to education? That's a really good point, and I agree with your point about the physicality that comes with that and the benefits. You could also see a world where it comes into different types of robotic technologies. Smaller form devices, more affordable devices, maybe even the general concept of making yourself a cyborg. Technology that comes in and plays a role alongside you as a human. So that's an interesting space to consider.
Mm.
And then to your latter point, really agree. And I've got a real life example actually just from last week. I was speaking to an organization which has come from, I think it's come from Cambridge University. It's called Cam AI, and they've developed off their experience of working with children that are slightly older. They've got mental health challenges. They've developed effectively a chatbot, but that's doing it a disservice to call it that and that alone. It's really highly trained to allow children to engage in it and share concerns that they otherwise wouldn't be so comfortable sharing. But my key feedback, and they're already on this, my key feedback is, this is full circle, isn't it? It takes us back, integration. So if that isn't finding its way into, in our case, CPOMs or safeguarding platform, if that isn't finding its way as appropriate into the hands of a human to take intervention and take action, then actually it could end up doing more damage than it is help. So that's absolutely fundamental. But it's really, really exciting when I see that. That's, I think, taking us back to that conversation about the hype. That technology exists. They've got
Yeah.
a demo account that they've given me, and I spent 3 or 4 hours chatting to it, just testing it out. And I think it's so amazing that on one ship we've got this vision, and you can see the roots of that vision coming to life in 2025, and that just makes me absolutely buzz. It really does.
Oh, I'm absolutely with you. The reason, let's face it, we're all in education or been in it for a long time, is, is that I know, like you say, it's cheesy, but it's because we do think we make a difference and we do love the idea of making a difference. And I think that's really, I think that's really exciting. I think it's interesting you should say about that company because I think it also gives a bit of an example of where technology should be talking about the art of the possible, and they should be saying, look, these are some of the things, and even if it's not fully formed, even sort of going, I think this is what happens in the schools, and I believe this could really benefit you as an education organization, educators, CEOs, all those sort of things. But you have to have, like you're pointing out to them, for it to really work within the mat or work within the school environment, it all needs to be integrated. And those, I think, I feel like over the course of the last 2 years, there's been a lot more of those conversations, a lot more round tables where technology and the educationists like yourselves and or from the organisations at least are coming together and talking more. So basically, there is, so hopefully we're going to get some of these more well-rounded, better solutions because the solutions are have to work basically, let's face it, for the benefit of children at the end of it.
Yeah, 100% agree again. And there's three things popped into my head as you talked there. And I think the reasons why I think that's the case. I think the first is um, the rise of CIO type people in trusts, or more to the point, the um, what we're seeing, I think, is a reality across the sector, which is technology now is a top table conversation in trusts. So whether you have a CIO or whether there's somebody that is technology driven, or whether it's just a conversation that happened in boardrooms in trusts, I think that's now much more prevalent than it was pre. I think that we have the pandemic in small part to thank for that, but also this wave of AI to thank for it as well. It's now being talked about. So in our current wave of strategy overall, we talk about three T's. We talk about time, we talk about talent, and we talk about technology. It's this triangle. And to see technology, and I've said this on several occasions internally, I really can't recall a moment in my career where we've talked about technology in such a fundamentally strategic way. It's always been important, don't get me wrong. And, an element of hygiene factor now comes with walking into a school and expecting a fast broadband connection, expecting a working device, etc. But to have it play such a key role alongside talent, 70% of our costs go towards our people, and rightly so, but to have it inside there, and time, which we know is such a precious resource, and actually technology of those three supports the other two, right?
Yeah.
It can help with recruitment and retention. It can help with the use of time. So that, I think that's one of the key reasons you see the sector come, and that will you'll see the rise of the CIO, the rise of the technology leader in trust. If not already seeing it, I think you do see it already.
Yeah.
The second thing I think that is happening is the wave of AI, and we've talked enough about that. The developments that are there. But the third thing I think is happening is a much bigger focus now on measuring impact. And I know there are organisations like Edtech Impact and others that are, and I think BISA are doing a lot as well to really, really challenge organisations to talk about the impact they can have. And that, I think that helps. It does help the integration conversation, but it helps to really keep organisations honest in being clear about what can they do, rather than necessarily putting those statements out there in a way that isn't well founded. And I'll just finish off that point with a quick, once again, personal analogy. And my wife will thank me for it, I'm sure. She,
I feel like I'm going to be careful about putting this out.
I think they'll make her a peer reviewer as well as I. She works in medical technology and particularly in regulation. And we often compare notes about how heavily regulated medical technology is. You have to go through clinical trials. Any piece of marketing needs to be absolutely crystal clear about what the evidence is, what the source is. And I wouldn't go as far to say that EdTech needs to be the same, but once again, with brief reference to a Wild West, I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion, but there is nothing to stop people going out there and saying, we will drive up attendance, we will do this, we will do that. And, in not so many years gone by, you would have walked around the likes of a bet and seen those big claims without necessarily having it found. And I think there is much more of a focus now, somewhat linked to my first point about, a more savvy consumer in the trust space, but also driven by organizations understanding that you really do need that evidence base to make those claims. So I think those three factors are making those conversations that you reference really happen.
That's really good. I think, and I think everyone listening should definitely take note of that. I totally agree. I think, it comes back to, why? Why should somebody take on your product? And you can't just say because it has all these features, you go, great, fantastic. So what?
Yeah.
So what? You've got loads of fantastic features as far as you're concerned.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I agree. I think that why is really important. I think it also comes back to I think when people procure now, like when we talk to certain mats, I think the understanding that these edtech companies are potentially partners, I think is people are far more aware. So they're not just a supplier of a piece of software then go away. There is this, it feels like anyway, and do correct me, but it feels like it's actually, if you're going to be a partner, you need to help us with our strategy. So if our strategy is to become more sustainable and we want, how are you going to help me with that? I know you may think you're only an HR product, but how are you going to help us with that overall objective? Because, those are our fundamentals. And if you're not going to help us there, then, is it the right sort of partnership? So there's almost sometimes, almost in some cases, I see some some mats are also looking outside of just this one-on-one relationship of you give me an HR product and we'll make it happen and make it work. But fundamentally we'll maintain our own view on our strategies. It's now like actually become a partner.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I think that there's naturally a part of the procurement regulations that support that as well. But I think it's cultural, as you allude, in that you need people that are going to work with you. I mean, I actually did a little tot up the other day of the amount of revenue income we're spending on our systems, and I did a bit of a comparison to the corporate space. This might be an interesting complementary point to the one you're making. And financially, I think we're putting in somewhere in the region of one shy of 1% of our income into those core systems I mentioned. And a typical corporate entity will spend somewhere between 3 and 6%. So that we are looking for partners, and I think it's a duty of the trust space to recognise that we're asking for quite a lot for not a lot of money in relative terms. And I actually think that goes to show how hard it is to make money in edtech. It really is hard. You
Yeah.
need serious scale, but you do need to think in a more open-minded way about what that relationship looks like, because the money for core systems is less so than if you go to private sector space. I think that working together on developments, working together to enhance the product, etc. I think there is an expectation I think I have now that a successful edtech organization does need to think globally. As much as that might hurt someone like me who is England and Wales focused, and why don't we think about our children? I think in order to make a sustainable business, you need to think about it on a global scale. Maybe not always. Maybe I'm being a bit sweeping there, but I do recognise, just from having done that recent work, that it's tough. It's tough to make money, and so that partnership, I think, goes both ways. It really does.
It does, but I was also talking to Kath Lane before this one, who does a lot of PR and stuff, and we were talking about the level of if you can get past. So in education, generally the level of trust you need to get to before you get accepted as a good partner or a good supplier is actually higher than lots of other markets. But if you get there because of the way that basically mats all talk, lots of mats talk to each other, education, the referenceability you get is really high as well. So if you can get to the point of trust, the high levels of trust, then actually you can be quite successful. But you're right, if you want to make, millions and millions of pounds, then you're probably going to have to start thinking about, going globally, because obviously the actual money actually in education is quite small in comparison, once you pay the staff and everything else, that what's left on sort of technology is quite small. But
Yeah,
I think the fact that basically there's lots of private equity coming into the space shows they do see it still as a market they feel they can invest in. So it's an interesting overall sort of problem, or maybe a challenge, which is exciting to
yeah.
people.
I think so, and I think I'm not a private equity specialist, but I imagine there are two. Strikes me there are probably two lenses on that. One is um, if you go back to that time, technology, talent piece. Not that I'm saying that they see it through this lens, but there is a high likelihood that spend on talent may reduce over time. Not that we're stripping our workforce away, because we really, really, really value the role of the human and the teachers. But there's a strong chance that technology could start to play more of an investment part. So there may be, whilst there's no drastically more funding coming into the space, you could see the balance of funding could go more towards that. So maybe when you look at it on the face of it, the fact that if we are a typical trust, let's say for a second, of spending less than 1% on our systems compared to other spaces, well, actually there's 2, 3, 4% to go out there, and actually that's the space to grow into. If we get our partnerships right, our solutions out, that would be a good way to look at it. I think the other perhaps reality is, rarely do you speak to an organization where they don't underpin the kind of social good that they offer, right? I mean, what better space than education? It feels like, and I do think it takes a certain type of even PE company to invest in that space, because you've got to have that kind of tune. But you'll know far more about it than I. It just feels like it takes that kind of extra little bit of moral consciousness for somebody to choose to be in this space, because it is hard, but the rewards are more than just financial, I think.
No, I'm with you 100%. And there are other ways of potentially getting revenue in. You can be socially conscious and conscientious, sorry, and support school. That's what I mean. Understanding schools' their strategy and what they want to get to, or maths as well. Sorry, maths and schools, is really really important, because if you can solve some of those problems, and it might be, with the maybe even with the budgets, sort of going, actually, I think I can, through these systems, we'll develop them with you to basically reduce down, X amount of hours of effort. That saves, that means that you can maybe bring another teacher in or whatever it might be. Well, then, that means you create a stronger bond. Do you see what I mean? Where you're sort of working with a mat to basically support their strategy. And I know it's a quite a simplistic view or example, but then you'll get more, well, one, you'll get more stickier as a business, and I hate the word to use stickier, but you that, because that trust has got to that point of that really high point of trust, and the
Yeah,
idea of not wanting to work with you is, it would be a silly from both parts, because
yeah,
you're
yeah.
giving the mat everything they need, but you're also getting what you need.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the small point on that is, I think the one advantage is that we will likely will see trust consolidation in the years to come. I mean, there's lots of talk in the media at the moment about the impact of the schools bill on academisation and trust growth. But I do think there is an inevitability, and I do have a bias here, obviously, because I believe in the value of large trusts. But I am also a trustee of a small trust, and I'm a chair of governors of a little half-formentary primary school, local authority primary school. And there are pros and cons, but I do see a trend towards trust aggregation. And I think, to your point about partnership and stickiness, if you are managing to build relationship with those trusts, then actually there's a natural revenue opportunity associated with that, because as they grow, you will grow. And I think that's the sector deserves that, because we're quite disparate at the moment.
Your explanation of it is far more fluid than mine and articulate, which I did say at the very beginning. You're far more articulate. So thank you for sure. So my final question, and I appreciate your time, so I'm really sorry for keeping you. And do you know, I've got so many more questions as well, which I'm sort of going, I wish I could answer these. But my final one is, from an EdTech perspective, so you've worked with EdTech, in the EdTech industry, you've worked, obviously, at the moment working in a math as well. Are there things that you think, if you had three things that you wanted EdTech to focus on for you, what would it be?
Right, that's a great question. I think number one we've already covered, but I'm going to underline it, which is working together as a sector. So integration being one of them, but just general partnerships in the sector, I think, to benefit trust in schools are paramount, and not overlooking that. Treating integration with others as a hygiene factor. So if you're in a particular domain space, let's say safeguarding, working with other safeguarding partners, seeing those as partners, not competitors. Easier said than done, I know. But I think seeing that integration as a hygiene factor would be number one. I think point two would be around gaining empathy. So one of the things that I most benefited from in my time as an EdTech, a bit of a game changer for me, actually, without even knowing that it was a game changer, was when I became a trustee of a small trust. And I'm still a trustee there today. I think it probably had a big role in me choosing and being successful in moving across. But in my role in the EdTech space, I think it had a huge impact on my empathy, because I thought I knew schools, but actually getting in and supporting them, offering your expertise, actually, it was part selfless, but a little bit selfish, actually, because I was able to take benefit back. And I don't mean commercial gain in terms of, I could sell them loads of product, but more the insight I was getting into the varied conversations that they were having. Technology's role in that being important, but they're being so much wider. So I'd really recommend that. And then probably the third thing relates to this thing about evidence and impact, and trying to. This is really tough. I recognise that, because it's a bit chicken egg. How do I get the evidence without first getting some schools to work with? But trying to drive that evidence through, whether it be case studies, working with the like of EdTech Impact, really trying to get it clear that what is the value you're having, what is that real impact. It could be a USP. It doesn't always have to be unique though, right? It just needs to be really clearly defined as evidence of impact. And so those would be my three. That's a little bit off the top of my head, but I hope that makes sense.
No, that's brilliant, fantastic. And regarding the third one, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I should imagine if they can sell the concept to you and they want to then build up the evidence, obviously it has to be as a partnership, but you'd be happy to basically go, okay, here's a couple of schools that you can work in and build up the evidence. Obviously for a financial potentially, gain maybe, but at the same time, you get the referenceability and you get, and I think in education more than any other market I've ever seen, referenceability is absolutely paramount. So getting maths schools on board and teachers, whichever part of the organization you work, you're trying to sell into or trying to build a solution for, make sure you get that referenceability from them for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the risk of opening the floodgates, so to speak, we're up.
Yeah.
We're always up for pilots and for consideration. I think particularly, with things that are breaking new ground, I think for us, we feel an almost obligation. A part of our strategy, which I've not touched on, is system generosity. So using what we have in scale to benefit not just ourselves, but the sector. And part of that is trying new things. There's always a challenge because that child that you're trying things on, so to speak, only has one chance. So it needs to be in a controlled way. It needs to be in a way where there is an element of confidence. But that doesn't mean we're not up for those pilots. We go through a process, as you say, with a subsection of our schools, try and match that to where we see the need. So absolutely agree with you, and would never say no, so to speak.
Yeah. I apologize if you now get like thousands of emails. Okay. I want to partner with you.
Nick said, yeah. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
Oh, James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like I say, I have got loads and loads more questions. I hope, I wish, and I pray that you will obviously do another one of these. I've got one big question on, what actually should education be going forward, but that's another question altogether.
Okay. Well, you give me some homework there. I'll prep for that for part 2.
Amazing. A big thank you very much. I know you're a busy person. And so, I apologize that we've already gone over by a few minutes, but it's been brilliant having you on board. And again, man, your insights are really, really, amazing. And I think they will help everybody who basically wants to listen to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. And all the best to everybody watching and listening.